realfaith.org.au.
They called a family meeting one day and told us that he was walking a very fine line between life and death, and they didn't give me any hope of him making a recovery at all. Even when he came home after the 8 months, they still said, when it's over, it's all over, one way or the other. That's all they would say. So even when he came home, we weren't sure whether he was going to keep going or not.
Welcome to Real Faith. Conversations about the impact faith has on our lives and the challenges we go through, helping us today and giving us hope for tomorrow. That's real people, real life and real faith with Eric Scatterbo.
Well, today we have more of our conversation with Ken and Lyn Overton, who are joining us from their home in Devonport, Tasmania, where they've lived all of their lives. Last time we heard how their near-perfect lives changed in 2004 when Lyn was struck down with prolonged, life-threatening illnesses. Lyn had collapsed at church and was clinically dead for over 30 minutes. This occurred after a blood clot broke free from her broken leg, punched through her heart, and lodged in her lungs. This caused a cardiac arrest, which basically means her heart stopped. She was taken to the hospital and en route suffered another arrest and yet another one on arrival. She then had a bleed in her brain, which caused a stroke. Medical staff at the hospital gave her little hope of survival. Yet Lyn not only survived, but was spared the anticipated serious brain damage. Today we'll hear about Lyn's miraculous recovery and about Ken's brush with death 5 years later. We'll pick up the story as Lyn is in hospital and Ken doesn't know whether or not she will survive. Let me just ask you, of the people who go through what Lyn went through, how many recover to the point where she's able to communicate and have a pretty much normal life? What percentage?
Well, I'm not sure about the percentage, but it's a well-known fact that if you have bleed on the left-hand side and then you get paralysed on the right side, that the speaking part of your brain is affected to the point where you just don't. Mm-hmm. And so they are medically surprised that she communicates and she's with it as much as possible.
Yeah, that's great.
So that is great. But what was really good that night is that I got so much peace having asked the Lord for that possibility. And I decided to go back into the ICU, and they said, "Oh, great, you've come early this morning," which is about 6 o'clock. And they said, "We've just taken back some of the medication from Lyn, and we'd really like to see if there's any response to you." So I went to her bedside and grabbed her hand. And, you know, when I looked into her eyes, I could see some life in there. Wow. Not the look of death that I saw a few days before.
That had to be so encouraging.
It was, and I sensed that God was going to give, at that point I actually sensed that God was going to give what he was getting me to ask him for, that she was going to live. And that gave me a real sense of hope. Didn't know then, of course, what the outcome would be. And the surgeon became quite concerned because I was getting excited about the fact I could see life there in her eyes, even though she couldn't communicate, of course. He wanted me to know, don't have false hope. He said, there's a difference between somebody responding to a command versus knowing who it's come from. And I thought, oh, great.
Just when you're getting hopeful, he kind of poo-poos it.
Yeah, well, he didn't want me to
have false hope.
Excited in case. Yeah, exactly, because when I raised it with him about I would hope that she would know us, you know, what effect that might have, he just wanted me to. Anyway, he came in not long after and said, "You're right, I think." He said, "I've just that was a few days later. He said, "I've just checked with Lyn to nod if you think that I'm your surgeon or I'm a doctor." And she must have nodded, and he was comfortable that she knew where the command came from.
Oh, that's good.
But there were just 2 or 3 times that I sensed that God was showing me that she was going to survive. One other time, it was Easter Sunday. I felt the Lord say to me that, when Jesus was put on the cross, those there would have thought it's all over. But no, God had this plan, of course, as we know, to raise him to life again. And so while everybody was thinking that it could be all over medically, I sensed God saying, I've got this plan to raise Lyn to life, but I never expected that she would be as good as she has been. But I had that assurance, that faith that she was going to live, which was very helpful. And as time went on, she eventually whispered to me something. She was trying to talk and she was calling me Kenneth. And, of course, that's when I'm in trouble normally. But even that was showing me there's a bit of normality in her, which encouraged me as well.
But you weren't in trouble.
No. But one thing that you might find interesting, or the listeners might find interesting, that when she was on life support, fully out to it, because they then induced her again, we had a visitor that came and he was praying for our 2 little baby grandchildren and for Lyn, for healing. And when he mentioned the grandchildren, a tear dropped out of Lyn's eye.
Oh.
And I pointed to him and said, just look at that. Anyway, it wasn't until a few months later, and when Lyn was actually home, we were just generally talking about it. And she remembered. You can.
No, I could hear him praying. Yes.
Oh, okay.
And she was right out to it. And also another time, a lady came and sang, didn't she? And
I could hear her too.
You could hear her as well.
So that had to be very encouraging.
Oh, very much so. But it shows us too that you can be medically induced or unconscious, but there's still that hearing that can take place.
Okay, Lyn, if I understand this correctly, at this point in the story, you're in an induced coma. So what happens to you next after being in this induced coma?
Well, then I woke up, and the first 2 emotions I felt were just shock and disbelief.
How long were you in the induced coma?
Only a couple of weeks, I think it was.
2 weeks.
2 weeks, yes.
So you were shocked? What were you shocked by?
Well, I was 47, and when Ken told me that I'd had a stroke, I thought, only elderly people have strokes.
Oh, right, yeah.
And because Lyn was at the gym a lot, weren't you?
I used to go to the gym, tried to keep myself fit and active and healthy, and I thought, goodness, a stroke.
Yeah. How else did you react coming out of the coma?
Well, then he told me how everything had happened, like with the plane and whatever, so I sort of, how everything had fallen into place to get me to Hobart, so I knew then that the Lord was with me and that he had a plan and a purpose for my life and what had happened.
Yeah, so for you went to church, and then all of a sudden you wake up like 2 weeks later in a whole different town.
In an intensive care unit, yes.
Yeah, so that had to be a shock in and of itself.
It was, yes.
How are you feeling?
Well, as I said, shocked at the time and probably a bit sad, I suppose, as well. But then I'm fairly determined. Once they told me that I had to do a lot of physio, I was up for that because I wanted to get myself right. So
we were careful to not say too much to Lyn about the results of the stroke. We didn't need her to bother with that, but she just went along with the flow and did what she needed to do. But she had to learn to walk again and all of that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. What were the results of the stroke?
That I couldn't use my right arm or hand, and my right leg was very heavy, so I had to sort of, eventually I got walking, and I was doing a lot of physiotherapy with my arm and hand, but even to this day, my hand is still clenched. So, and I had 2 years therapy altogether on that. But it's amazing what you can do with one hand, Eric.
Oh, if you have to. So you went from being physically active, going to the gym, to having severe limitations physically.
Yes, exactly.
So that was a shock in and of itself.
Exactly.
Was there kind of a mourning period for what you've lost?
Yes, that probably happened when I came home, because once you get home to what was your normal living circumstances, you quickly realise that life has taken on a new normal. It's not the same. So that's probably when I did more mourning, I think.
For what you've lost, your mobility?
Yes.
Could you drive?
Yes. I had to wait 2 years, and then had to do a driving test, and I got my licence back, which is fantastic.
And then she got her first driving ticket.
First speeding ticket.
So not only were you back driving, but going pretty fast.
After, was it how many years? 30 years.
30-something years of having a licence, and then, yes, that happened.
Now, I know you were happy to be back mobile again, but maybe you were rejoicing a little bit too much.
Probably.
All righty. So you went through this whole health journey with lasting results to this day. As you mentioned, you still have some limitations, but with physical therapy, you've been able to overcome many things and have a lot of movement in your arms and legs that you thought maybe you wouldn't have. Is that right?
Yes, just my leg, that's fine, but not so much my hand and whatever, no.
So she's had to learn to do everything with just one hand, one arm, and she's done an amazing job after all
Well,
these
it's
years.
amazing what you can do with one hand, so...
Yeah.
She sometimes says that if God did a miracle to have the other one move,
I don't know what I'd do with it.
Oh, is that right? Wow.
Well, I'm just so used to using my left hand now.
Yeah.
I can even write with my left hand now, so...
So you had to learn that all from scratch.
Yeah, well, I was right-handed before, so it's sort of...
Oh, well, that's a tremendous adjustment in and of itself. You're right-handed,
Yes,
and you
exactly.
lose the use of your right hand.
there's nothing stopped Lyn for doing what she can do. She often says, let me do what I can do, and the things she can't do, we help her with. But she's fantastic.
Our guests today are once again Ken and Lyn Overton, who have both survived near-death health issues 5 years apart. We just heard about Lyn's miraculous recovery. Next, we'll hear about Ken's brush with death 5 years later and about his remarkable recovery. All that and more is coming up when we return right here on Real Faith.
The Word for Today is Australia's most widely read daily devotional, designed to give you practical teaching to keep you focused on your relationship with Jesus. Read it online or subscribe to the free printed edition at thewordfortoday.com.au.
You're listening to Real Faith, conversations with real people about how God works in their lives. If you want to know more about integrating faith into your life, our website is realfaith.org.au. Just go to the website and you'll find helpful articles about the impact faith can have on your life. Once again, that's realfaith.org.au.
Welcome back. I'm Eric Scadabo, and today, once again, I'm chatting with Ken and Lyn Overton, whose near-perfect lives changed in an instant when they were struck down with prolonged, life-threatening illnesses 5 years apart. Before the break, we heard about Lyn's illness and miraculous recovery. Now, we'll hear what happened to Ken. Okay, so Ken, you had become the carer for the time that Lyn was recovering.
That's right. Yep.
Now, fast forward 5 years, is it, to 2009? There's a switch. The script flips, in a sense. Is that right?
That's right. I become a sufferer.
Okay. Lyn, take us to 2009. What happened to Ken?
Ken woke up one morning with dreadful pain, so he was taken to the hospital, then transferred to Launceston, where he was placed on life support, and he was diagnosed with acute necrotic hemorrhagic pancreatitis.
I have no idea what that is.
No, it just means the pancreas is inflamed and died, and the digestive enzymes that normally puts in your stomach start attacking the other organs in your body.
Okay, so once again, Ken, you've had no history of any health issues up to this point?
Just happened overnight.
Just happened, and suddenly you're severely ill.
Well, reflecting back, there was a little, probably a week or two before, I did have quite a bit of pain in the left side, and now I've understood this a lot more, that was probably my gallbladder playing up. There was a stone in the bile duct, which then killed my pancreas.
Okay, Lyn, what happened next?
Well, all of that shut his body down, and he had multiple organ failure.
So it was just going from bad to worse.
Yes, so that started him on a journey in the intensive care unit of almost 4 months. The first 2 months he was in an unconscious state, and in the hospital for a total of 8 months.
Wow, so the script well and truly flipped.
Yes.
So you went from being the patient 5 years earlier to now you're the carer.
That's right, exactly, yes.
But we should say that he was unconscious for much of that time, is that right?
Yes, for the first 2 months he was unconscious, yes.
So Lyn, you were faithfully by his side all that time for several months when he was unconscious, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Just about every day.
And what was his response when he finally became conscious?
Where were you when I needed you the most?
Ken, probably not the best thing to say at that point, but you had no idea, is that right?
No, not at all. It was probably the drugs and just sort of...
Don't blame it on the drugs.
I don't know. Medical people could tell you that. But it sort of shocked me, I suppose, to see her and the family, and just I was dazed.
Yeah. So Lyn, what did you learn about his medical situation?
Well, after 4 weeks in hospital, they decided to remove his pancreas. So approximately 80% of the pancreas was taken out, along with his gallbladder. But the little piece of pancreas left is still producing insulin, so he's not a diabetic, which is great. But I did mean to say, while he was in hospital, he also developed blood poisoning, had internal bleeding, and picked up not one but 5 different hospital bugs.
Oh, wow.
As well as the other issues. So
Wow.
he was in a bad way.
Well, when you guys get sick, you don't do it halfway.
No.
But temporarily.
Temporarily, yes. So, wow, I'm just amazed at how much the script flipped. I mean, suddenly, instead of you being in the hospital bed, Ken is in the hospital bed,
That's
unconscious.
right.
Just exactly the opposite. And so what were you thinking during this whole time, Lyn? And how was your faith in the Lord
Well,
at that point?
I used to walk in the park before I go and see Ken. And I remember a few times where I'd pray a lot of the time. And one time I just said, Lord, I'd love for him to be healed. But if that's not what you want, not my will, but yours be done. I did that a few times, just handed him over because I thought, there's not much I can do about it, except hand him over to the Lord.
And your faith helped you get through all the hard
Yes.
times?
Oh, yes.
I was just going to say, the thing that we both became, or you became aware, and I was aware too when I came round, that people were praying for us. And you just knew, there were people leaving messages and, just made us realise that it's, well, we often say, if God lays it on your heart to pray for somebody, do it, because when you do, you'll participate in what he's intending to do, because we've found since that there's a lot of people who prayed for us that we don't even know, but they heard about our story, and probably particularly because Lyn went first down and then myself. And so people really were very intentional about their care.
Now, Lyn, did the doctors think Ken was going to make it?
No, Eric, they didn't. They called a family meeting one day and told us that he was walking a very fine line between life and death, and they didn't give me any hope of him making a recovery at all. Even when he came home after the 8 months, they still said, when it's over, it's all over, one way or the other. That's all they would say. So even when he came home, we weren't sure whether he was going to keep going or not.
Oh, so they thought he might not make it, even if he came home?
That's right, yes.
So that's looking pretty bleak at that point.
Yes.
Well, there was quite a bit of time, would you believe? 5 months I didn't talk.
5 months you didn't talk. Lyn, do you
making
have
up
any
for
comments
now.
on that?
Yes. 14 months before he could walk unaided.
11 months before I ate.
Ate and could keep a meal down, yes.
Lost 30 kilograms of weight, but I don't suggest anybody goes to hospital for that.
I wouldn't suggest that, no. So a long journey and kind of touch and
Yes.
go on whether you would ever completely recover.
Yes, it's true.
So Ken, how are you doing now? How is your recovery?
Well, I don't think I've ever felt so well. And
Is that right?
Yeah, no, true. And I living just a normal life, and I'm still under research with a hematologist because they're amazed after all this time, since 2009, that that little bit of pancreas must have survived to help me eat. And I do take a little enzyme that assists me, but I'm not a diabetic. And they think medically that's impossible.
Wow.
Not to be a diabetic without the pancreas.
Both of you are living miracles.
Well, they say we are.
I mean, and you have doctors saying that on camera.
It is a walking miracle. A walking miracle.
You shouldn't be alive today.
It's amazing. It really is amazing. It's the 1 in a billion job that you're involved in, where you do lots and lots of training and hope that you'll get to see one of those jobs where you could say it was a miracle, where everything on that day went to plan.
And the percentage of people who survive what you've both been through is very, very small.
Yeah, and they have said, particularly when there's 2 of us, not, sometimes with 1, but a couple who've survived like we have, they see it as miraculous.
Now, Lyn,
Yes.
what was your response when you got your husband back?
Oh, I was very pleased to have him back home again.
But you didn't know what kind of condition initially he
No,
would be.
that's true.
So he gradually, as the months went on, you got the old Ken
Sort of
back.
started to improve a bit, yes.
Yeah, we really can both testify that apart from Lyn's leg and her arm and immobility there, we've probably never felt so well.
Yes.
So you're doing pretty good health-wise these days.
Well,
Both
one
of
of the things yeah, for sure. One of the things, because you take lots of drugs and what have you, and needed to at the time. But I remember saying to my doctor when I came home, I understand I need a bit of help with my pancreas so I can produce insulin, comfortably with food. But there's 16 other tablets here I'd like to stop. He said, Ken, you can't do that. Because he said, you're alive. But I said, I don't want to live on those for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And surely I can come back and ask you for one or two of those back again if I need to, if I deteriorate again or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
He said, that's reasonably logic. So it's up to you if you choose to do that. And within a week, people in the community here could see the change. I was walking on sticks then, trying to get along. But my countenance changed in a week.
Wow.
By getting off some of those drugs. But I'm not suggesting anybody else does that.
Yeah,
but that's how it was for me.
Yeah. So both of you had to relearn how to walk at one point.
That's right. Lyn did too.
I'm just amazed at how many things you have in common. Terrible things like health challenges, but both of you being in a coma, both of you having to learn to walk again, and going from very desperate near-death situations to regaining most of your health and abilities.
Yes.
5 years apart.
Yeah, I think there's been quite an advantage for us.
Well, what is that?
In the fact that we've both been sufferers and we've both been carers.
Yeah.
So we have a bit of understanding and respect for that.
Yeah.
But I'd say that in many ways the caring side of it's harder.
Yes, I would agree.
So take us up to date health-wise. Anything else that we need to know about your health these days?
No, we're all good.
I think our health's fine at the moment. Thank you, yes.
And then also, let's kind of look back over all of this whole journey you were on, going from a very successful business and one that allowed you to do world traveling, going from that to maybe not even surviving because of these health issues, to where you are now, enjoying your 16 grandchildren. What are your reflections over this whole journey and what God has taught you through it all?
Well, there's one thing in the early stages we came to terms with, to look at what we have in both situations, not what we've lost. And so you become thankful for what you do have. And the thing too with Lyn, particularly I've really appreciated, she lives with a joyful spirit. And that's something that's a gift from God. The joy, hope, joy and peace, I believe, are the three things that God gives and are crucial to comfort us in life. And so with Lyn, it's not a happiness thing, because you can be happy today and not tomorrow because of circumstance. But if you're joyful in spite of your circumstances, and that's been a blessing. And I was just going to say, and the other thing is how God changes you. I can't believe the things he's done to make us more content, more restful, more thankful. And so we don't need to pursue the things that we used to do necessarily. There's a lot of things we've done in our life. We've been blessed, you wouldn't believe, in those 29 years. But as things have changed physically for us, we're able to cope with life very well and thankful.
Just good to be alive.
Amen. Now, Lyn, if I remember correctly, shortly before your illness in 2004, you had prayed to God that he would help you become closer to him. Is that right?
Yes, I had done.
You did not expect...
Never imagining the way he would do it.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of people are saying, there's no way I'm going to pray that now. But in a sense, you are closer to him now. Is that right?
Yes, because I experienced, when I was recovering, I experienced more of his love, as Ken said, his joy, his peace, everything.
So the peace that passes all understanding was with you throughout your whole ordeal.
Yes, I definitely felt his presence with me while I was in the hospital and recovering, yes.
And Ken, you were feeling the same, but as somebody desperately praying for your wife.
Yeah, for sure. It's one of those things, when you go through something very traumatic and outside your control, we really experienced that God as a father stepped in, where he says he'll never leave us, he'll never forsake us. It's so true. And he'll be there we live with the confidence now that whatever we have to face in our life, because of what we experience, that God will be there, faithful to his word.
Mm-hmm.
It's an amazing thing. Even the peace side of it. In some ways, you've got to go through something to experience that peace that passes all understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, in life, we can be, or me, be very independent sometimes. But God is very gracious to step in.
Now, what if somebody's listening today and says, okay, well, you guys are both miracles. I wasn't so fortunate. My loved one passed away. Do you have anything to share with them?
Yeah, well, I'll just make a comment on that. I had when we shared the story once, somebody made a comment and said, you're very fortunate you've still got Lyn. I lost my wife. Yeah, that very comment. Yeah. Oh, yes, and would I feel the same towards God? And do you think the experience would be the same? The only way I could answer him was to say, well, Lyn didn't pass away, but I've got enough faith and have had experience with God now to know that if she had have done, and when she does, I can trust him to actually be there to help me through the circumstance and the sadness of it all. God just doesn't leave us alone when we're in trouble. And unfortunately, trials are in our lives, and we've found that you learn things through adversity that you never learn through prosperity. We can both say, can't we, we're glad in many ways we've been through this in our life.
Yes.
The reflection of it, naturally speaking, has been very hard, but spiritually,
it grows you.
It grows you.
Ken and Lyn Overton, thank you so much for sharing your miraculous stories.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that was the conclusion of our two-part conversation with Ken and Lyn Overton, who have both survived near-death health issues 5 years apart. Just to recap, Ken spent 102 days on life support in intensive care at Launceston General Hospital, recovering from life-threatening pancreatic necrosis and multiple organ failure. Again, doctors gave him little chance of survival, but Ken beat insurmountable odds. If you would like to find out more about their miraculous story, you can read about it in the book, Where There's Life, There's Hope, the incredible true story of Ken and Lyn Overton, written by Paul O'Rourke. Also, you can visit their website. It's miraculousrecovery.com.au. Once again, that's miraculousrecovery.com.au. Well, thank you so much for joining us for Ken and Lyn Overton's incredible story. Until next time, I'm Eric Scadabo. So long, and God bless.
You've been listening to Real Faith, and if you have any questions or comments, you can send us a message through our website, realfaith.org.au. That's realfaith.org.au.
Real Faith is a production of Vision Christian Media.
This program is a production of Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, see vision.org.au.